Tonight, we begin with a development that senior military officials in Washington, London, and Kyiv had feared, anticipated, and urgently prepared for. A development that did not unfold over weeks or months, but inside a single devastating 48-hour window. 48 hours that shattered a defensive network Russia spent 2 full years building. 48 hours that exposed a weakness Vladimir Putin believed could never be touched. 48 hours that forced Russian generals into an emergency call with the Kremlin itself. Bomb. What Ukraine did this week crossed a line Moscow had staked everything on protecting. And when that line finally broke, Russia did not answer with force. It answered with chaos, confusion, and something analysts almost never witness from the Kremlin. Silence. Ukraine did not hesitate. They moved with precision, coordination, and overwhelming tactical dominance. And tonight we have the details. We have intercepted communications. We have satellite imagery. And for the first time, we have a clearer picture of what Vladimir Putin believed was his final line of defense and how Ukraine destroyed it in full view of the world. For months, there were signs, not public announcements, not diplomatic warnings, only subtle indicators. Russia was building something unprecedented behind its front lines, something meant to be impenetrable, something Putin privately described to his commanders as the guarantee of operational continuity. Russia has been aggressive throughout this war, but it has also been methodical. Its defensive preparations followed a rhythm, a predictability, almost a doctrine. But this month, Western intelligence agencies noticed something alarming. The rhythm vanished. Construction activity stopped. Communication networks went dark. Satellite signatures that had been constant for 18 months simply disappeared. Fan analysts who track Russian military infrastructure know these signals well. The movement of specialized engineering units, the surge in encrypted logistics traffic, the repositioning of advanced air defense systems, the sudden consolidation of command authority. All of it went quiet. And whenever Russia goes quiet, history shows something devastating is coming. On the question Western officials could not answer was simple. Was Russia preparing to activate this network, or was someone else about to destroy it? Early Tuesday morning, Ukrainian military intelligence detected what they described as abnormal defensive posture changes across Russia's southern operational zone. This included the activation of backup command frequencies that had not been used for more than 16 months. These are emergency protocols Russia only triggers when facing an imminent threat, catastrophic system failure, or a strategic surprise. At first, Ukrainian analysts did not know which category the situation fell into, or whether it was all three at the same time. But one thing was immediately clear. Russia was panicking. Something had gone terribly wrong inside its most protected defensive architecture. And when a nuclear-armed power shifts into emergency mode without explanation, every intelligence agency on Earth takes notice. Within hours, the reason became clear. Ukraine had found it, Ukraine had targeted it, and Ukraine had destroyed it. Banned the emergency call issued from Russian military command to the Kremlin was not routine. It was not procedural. It was not symbolic. It was desperate. And senior officials speaking under strict anonymity described the intercepted communications as unlike anything monitored since the war began. Generals with direct access to Vladimir Putin were demanding immediate reinforcement of assets that no longer existed. The language used was stark and alarming, catastrophic, unrecoverable, existential to Southern theater operations. But defensive networks only matter if the enemy hesitates before striking. Ukraine did not hesitate. In fact, the operation carried out this week was among the most sophisticated and coordinated actions seen since the liberation of Kherson. Here is what we know so far. Within hours of confirming the location of Russia's final defensive backbone, Ukraine launched precision strikes from multiple directions at the same time. These were not isolated drone attacks like those seen in recent months. These were fully integrated strike packages combining domestically produced long-range systems, Western Dodge supplied precision weapons and real-time intelligence Russia believed Ukraine could not access. Again, Ukraine did not probe, they did not test, they executed. The trustful intelligence sources confirmed that Ukraine struck at least 23 high-value targets across occupied territory and inside Russia itself. Among them was a command integration center recently upgraded to serve as the primary coordination node for all Russian operations south of Zaporizhia. The means Ukraine struck before Russia could relocate key personnel. They struck before backup systems could be activated. They struck before Moscow fully understood what was unfolding. They hit the primary fuel distribution hub outside Mariupol. They hit the ammunition consolidation depot near Melitopol. They struck 3 mobile command posts, likely preparing to coordinate a spring offensive. They destroyed the communications relay station, linking frontline units directly to strategic command in Moscow. Banned in simple terms, Ukraine did not just attack Russian forces. They attacked Russia's ability to command supply and sustain those forces. They targeted the infrastructure that made continued offensive operations possible. This is what triggered the frantic emergency call. Russian generals immediately understood this was not isolated damage. This was systemic collapse. Putin's final line of defense was not a trench network. It was not a fortified position. It was the integrated command and logistics architecture that kept everything functioning, and Ukraine erased it, not recklessly, not impulsively, but surgically. Ukraine did not waste missiles on symbolic targets. They did not strike population centers. They went after the nervous system of Russian military operations. They hit the arteries that kept the war machine alive. And this is where the story becomes even more significant. Western intelligence officials now believe Russia's defensive consolidation over recent months was meant to test Ukraine's capabilities. Moscow wanted to know whether Ukraine could identify its most protected assets, whether Western support had weakened, whether Ukrainian targeting had degraded, whether Kyiv would hesitate, but the opposite happened. Ukraine did not hesitate. They executed a strike package so precise and so carefully sequenced that even Russian military bloggers began asking uncomfortable questions. Getting the Kremlin's attention is not easy, but this week Ukraine achieved something extraordinary. They proved they now operate inside Russia's decision-making cycle. Analysts speaking with Western media said Russia's defensive posture acted as a tripwire, a way to measure Ukrainian reach before committing to offensive operations. But Ukraine demonstrated that it remains both capable and confident. Their strikes were not just accurate. They were timed so precisely that Russian air defenses engaged phantom targets while real weapons reached their objectives. And that sequencing matters. It shows intelligence dominance. It shows Ukraine is not reacting to Russian moves. They are anticipating them. They are inside the loop, and that is Vladimir Putin's greatest vulnerability. As reports continued to arrive throughout the day, the scale of Ukraine's operation became clearer. Ukrainian drone units carried out overnight strikes on 6 fuel depots. These attacks forced Russian logistics convoys to reroute through damaged secondary roads, adding days to already strained resupply timelines. Special operations forces targeted an electronic warfare installation that had been upgraded within the last 90 days. Naval drone units operating in the Black Sea struck an ammunition transport vessel that had departed Novorossiysk only hours earlier. MBDA precision artillery, guided by real-time satellite data, destroyed 4 ammunition storage facilities in a single synchronized barrage. This was not harassment. This was not attrition. This was strategic decapitation. This was operational paralysis. And operational paralysis is the one condition Russia has struggled to overcome since the earliest weeks of the war. For every defensive adaptation Russia has made, Ukraine has responded with a method that renders it obsolete. For every logistical workaround, Ukraine has identified and neutralized the alternative. This is the reality Russian generals warned Vladimir Putin about, and this is the reality he can no longer ignore. Russia believed this war would last 3 days. They believed Kyiv would fall. They believed President Zelensky would flee. They believed NATO would fracture under pressure. They believed Western resolve would collapse after the first winter. Tonight, the opposite is true. Ukraine is stronger than it was a year ago. Western military support has increased. NATO has expanded. Russian equipment losses now exceed 12,000 confirmed armored vehicles. Casualty estimates exceed 350,000 by conservative Western assessments. Plain. And the gap between Kremlin narrative and battlefield reality has never been wider. Oster, what makes this moment so dangerous is that Russia's failure comes at a time when Vladimir Putin faces intense internal pressure. Banjin hardliners within the security services are pushing for escalation. Oligarchs with frozen assets want sanctions relief. Generals are demanding resources they are not receiving. Regional governors want answers about mobilization. And a war-weary public wants it to end. And a war-weary public wants it to end. And a war-weary public wants it to end. Putin is balancing all of this while confronting a military reality that contradicts everything state media has promised. And leaders in this position do not act from strength, they act from desperation, they act from vulnerability. Tonight, Washington issued a statement now circulating across NATO capitals. It was designed to signal that the United States will not tolerate further escalation from Moscow. Bond senior defense officials said clearly that Russia's defensive collapse is inconsistent with any credible path toward negotiated resolution. Dia. That is diplomatic language for something much simpler. Russia is losing, and everyone knows it. You do not hear that tone from the Pentagon unless something strategic has shifted. Banned Britain, France, and Germany issued coordinated statements within hours. The message was unified. The message was clear. This failure belongs to Moscow, and it will not change Western support. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the nation in a calm, measured, and defiant speech. He said they built walls, we found doors. He said they believed their secrets were safe. They were wrong. And he said every line they draw, we will cross. Every fortress they build, we will breach. Every threat they make, we will answer. These were not slogans. These were statements from a wartime leader who fully understands what his forces achieved this week. At the same time, new concerns emerged. Russia's defensive collapse did not happen in isolation. Belarus conducted unannounced military exercises near the Polish border. Russian naval patrols increased in the Baltic Sea. Cyber attacks targeted Ukrainian government systems. Disinformation campaigns surged across European social media. And all of this unfolded within the same 48-hour window. When Russia moves multiple pieces at once, it signals a larger effort to regain initiative through distraction. But distraction only works if the target loses focus. Ukraine did not. And intelligence analysts are now evaluating several possible next steps: emergency reconstruction of destroyed infrastructure, retaliatory strikes meant to restore psychological dominance, or escalatory actions previously held in reserve, but Ukraine changed the equation. They did not wait for permission. They did not delay for diplomacy. They did not hedge. They struck decisively. Now the world is watching a test of resolve. Russia is testing Western unity. Ukraine is proving its offensive capability. Washington is working to prevent uncontrolled escalation. Europe is focused on stopping the war from spreading. Each decision now carries weight far beyond the battlefield. Intelligence sources report a surge in encrypted communications between Moscow and frontline commanders. Russian logistics networks are in disarray. Command authority is being contained. And Putin's choice to consolidate defenses into a single integrated system is now seen as a catastrophic miscalculation. Ukraine is not slowing down, it is accelerating. Their actions sent a message to Moscow that the old rules no longer apply, and a message to the West that its investment in Ukraine is delivering results. What happens next depends on Vladimir Putin's next move. Escalation will be met with readiness. Retreat will mark this moment as the collapse of Russia's strategic position. Beyond either way, the trajectory of the war has shifted. Tonight, Moscow appears afraid. The Kremlin is quiet. Too quiet. And when the Kremlin is quiet, it means calculations are underway. Because tonight, Vladimir Putin learned something he has resisted for 3 years. Ukraine will not break. The West will not abandon them, and Russia's final line of defense no longer exists. And this story is far from over, but one thing is unmistakable. Russia's strategic assumptions have collapsed. Ukraine's capabilities have exceeded expectations, and the next decision Moscow makes will shape European security for decades to come. Tom Lee and we will be here watching every development as the next phase unfolds.